Hey, what's up, guys? Real quick before we get into this episode, know that there is some explicit language. I don't recommend listening to this one with your kids. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Tactical Baby Gear podcast. Our guest this week is a Marine, a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6. He was a federal air marshal at one time. He did a lot of counterterrorism work and things of that nature, and has really focused his life most recently on human trafficking and child sex slavery, and recently put out a documentary called Contraland. This guest is none other than the one and only Craig, the Sawman Sawyer. Craig, thanks for coming. Thanks for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Beav, it's a pleasure, man. Let's have some fun and share some scoop with people
definitely.
About what's going on.
So, as I just mentioned, Craig put out this documentary recently. His team, it's not just him. He's got a team around him. He's got an organization called Vets for Child Rescue, where they are focused on tracking down and taking out predators doing human trafficking, child sex slavery, things of that nature. So it's just a crazy thing. When I saw that documentary come out, it just kind of, it hits home for me as a dad with two young daughters. And it just strikes a little bit of fear, I think, into a lot of parents when they see that, and just like a lot of like fear and just anger and all those kinds of things. So I wanted to kind of hear some of that stuff like firsthand from you and explain to the audience of like how big the problem is and things of that nature. But I think there's a lot that people can learn from watching the documentary, but there's a lot of questions that kind of arose and things that it seemed to be commonalities amongst a lot of like the predators and the victims. So let's hear some of it from you and kind of like how you got involved with that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, pardon me, you mentioned fear, and I think that's an important point to touch on first. We, as warriors, it's not healthy to live in fear and live a fear-motivated life, right? That's not our most effective. But if you don't have some fear, you'll have no mechanism or a tendency of self-preservation, right? So somewhere in there's a perfect balance of recognizing the danger but not being paralyzed from it. And what I see in the homeland is that, you know, I had deployed all over God's green earth. I've been to 60 countries now, and I've worked under the banner of several different agencies, and I've seen a lot. And I was defending my people, the people that I loved, and the peace and the security and the freedom that I loved. And that's why I was willing to go forward and defend it. And that's why most of us, I think, in the military do that. You know, we think it's the right thing to do. And I realized that, man, the boogeyman, I don't need to deploy somewhere else to keep the boogeyman from coming to the United States. He's already here. There are already predators actively hunting and destroying our children. It's already well underway, and it's rampant. And the problem is the people don't know about it because the predators enjoy a lot of top cover from our legal system and from our media. And it was really upsetting for me to know about it. I come from the covert background. I've dealt with a lot of high-level stuff that we don't talk about for national security reasons. And I saw a covert operation in this child trafficking in the United States when a friend of mine from the CIA was breaking it down for me, saying, "Hey, Craig, here's what's going on with this, and here's how bad it is." I'm like, that can't be the case. I don't see it. Right?
Because
it's not readily perceptible.
Which is hard to imagine, right? Because you talk about, it's a $38 billion a year industry that's underground, that's not talked about, that's not heard of, and you're like, how is something like that happening behind the scenes that people don't understand that it's happening to tens of thousands of victims a year, and at 30, and that's just in the U.S., right? $38 billion a year in the U.S. alone.
Yeah. And so imagine how many children have to be sold for God knows what, everything all the way up to and including torture to death. These children right here in the United States, not somewhere else, not some third world war-torn country, the United States, where we would like to feel like we're better than that. I would like to feel like we're better than that. And so when I started talking to the investigators that were part of these big cases, and they're like, man, this will break your heart. I don't care what you've been exposed to as a veteran around the world. This is the most messed up and just despicable element of mankind. It's truly, when you get past all the different layers of it, and it's a complex issue. You know, a lot of our political officials are compromised. We're starting to see now the people that networked with people like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and Harvey Weinstein and all of these. They're all have one foot in the camp of pedophilia and child trafficking. That's kind of like a sick element of a lot of what the wealthy and powerful seem to get off on, abusing children in different ways. And so there's the political corruption, because there's the power play. They blackmail each other. They video each other at the different, islands and mansion parties and things like that. So there's a lot of blackmail. We call it brownstoning operations in the intelligence community. And we're getting compromised politically. You and I are voting for a guy that's telling us he's doing something for us, and he's really not, because someone else owns him, because they got him on video doing something that he can't survive if it were to go public.
Right. And this goes to the what you guys describe as the elite predators, right? The people, the trusted people of the public, the doctors, the lawyers, the
elite
police.
Elite really refers to financial wealth and power, influence, and there are a lot of different
or trust, right?
Yeah, we arrested 2 elite predators just during the filming of Contraland. So it was concerning and upsetting. So political corruption, then you got the money, right? The multi-billion-dollar a year industry. People are getting rich off of this. The local drug dealers now, MS-13, selling kids now because they can make more money from it than selling drugs or weapons. And so then you got the sexual perverts and those sickos. And then you've got another element that are just there. They are sick and sadistic, and they want to harm someone. And there's an element of those people who are involved in literally a Luciferian satanic cult, where they feel like the thing that they need to be doing is torturing children to death in ceremonies. And it gets really dark and so crazy that, quite frankly, I don't like to go into detail about it, because people just go, that can't be true. And it's all starting to come out now, though. And as Ghislaine Maxwell starts testifying, and they start unraveling that intel and exploiting the evil that's in that woman's head, and investigating the network involved that she's involved in, and that she and Epstein catered to, it'll all start coming out more and more and more. But people are paying attention to it already, understand that, we're not being told about this on the mainstream news media. So, but after all the sexual perversion, all that, there is literally a clash between good and evil. It is at its core. It is a spiritual clash. There's a negative energy and there's a positive energy. I don't care if people fully understand it or not. There is a nature of good and bad in this universe, and what drives people to do these horrible, unthinkable things, it's evil. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do about this thing? I've got a lot of skills, man, and Uncle Sam's poured millions of dollars into training me, and I've given a lot of my time and my health all over God's green earth. What can I do about this? And I realized that I was witnessing a covert operation, very efficient, very effective, with a lot of top cover. And I'm like, the worst thing that I could do against them is to compromise it, to take away that veil of secrecy, to wreck it for them, to wreck the ease at which they are operating against our children. And the best tool that I could identify is a quality documentary that walks the people through the reality of it. Because like you and I have just been saying, you can't just tell someone, oh, this is happening at this degree, and you've never been told about it. It's hard for us to wrap our minds around it. But then when you walk them through it, you show them how many predators come running, and you show them how they think, and you show them the surviving victims and everything. People can start to see the evidence of, wow, this is This is actually a real thing, and wow, it's actually big, and it's right here in my hometown. It's not somewhere else.
Right. It's widespread across the country, as you showed in your documentary, like the small town of Connecticut, or, you know, all these other small towns, and to let them know, like, you guys put an ad out on Craigslist, I guess it was, right? For what is an ad like that?
Craigslist is one of them.
Right. You know, and then you got thousands of people responding to these ads, which is just crazy in some small town. And you're saying, I mean, this is happening across the country in every small town across America. And I think that's what's important to know. And, you know, on the flip side of it, for the predators, or not the predators, but the victims, you know, there's that side of it. Like, we've talked a lot about the predators already, and you just kind of touched on it. I want to go deeper into some of those things, but like the victims, like how there's the victim side of it, and like how they get groomed into this, how a lot of people wonder, like, how in America does a young girl, a 12, 13, 4, 5, 6-year-old girl, and some boys, fall into this trap, and how does that happen?
Yeah, it happens a number of different ways. A lot of ways that we're tracking on now is Child Protective Services. They're state-run organizations, and they get financial incentives from taking children from their biological families. There is no financial incentive in reuniting them with their biological families. That's a counterproductive arrangement. And let's say the biological parents or single parent are problematic. Well, then taking a child from a horrifically abusive parent would be a rescue. That'd be a good thing. And in theory, CPS is supposed to take children from horrible situations and put them into more healthy situations. And in a lot of cases, I'm sure that is the reality. But it's also very prevalent that they're targeting typically single moms that may be working multiple jobs. She may have multiple kids, and she's trying her best to raise them without a daddy. And it's hard work. It's exhausting. I would not want to have to do it. God bless the ones that are doing the best they can, but they get targeted by the state. They have a lot of money, a lot of horsepower, and these single moms can't all put up a big legal defense because it's expensive, and you have to know people and find good lawyers. The state know that. And so they'll go in CPS, target the mom. Hey, this kid's nose looks sturdy. This one looks a little thin. We find you. We deem you an abusive mother. We're taking your kids. Now, again, sometimes they are abusive crackhead moms who are prostituting themselves, prostituting their own kids, and CPS taking the kids. It would be a rescue. But in some cases, the moms are innocent, and it's a loving family, and although not perfect, you know, they're targeting and taking the children illegitimately. Anyway, the children go into the foster system, and they get passed from one household to another, some loving, some abusive. And then eventually the children get handed off one too many times and off the books completely and sold outright on the black market as a piece of meat to torture and abuse and murder or do whatever you want. So that is a very dark and diabolical thing. Now, one young lady that we were able to recover from this lifestyle she was a runaway, as a lot of them are. They start off as runaways, and then they fall victims. And I'll walk you through it a little bit more. But she was out there on the run looking for, you know, a place to stay, food and shelter. And there was a young man who was being pimped out by his own mother. Well, the young man befriended the girl and as a sort of recruiter. And he said, you can hang with our family. You'll be one of us. We'll take care of you. And then they began grooming her. And then there was drug abuse involved. And then they began slowly prostituting her out. And then she eventually began prostituting herself. They prostitute themselves out after a while.
Right.
So there's one scenario.
Yeah.
It's just
it seems like drugs and alcohol gets used in the early stages of the grooming process in order to sort of gain and maintain control of some of these people, right? Because they have to be able to cope, so they're using drugs and alcohol to control, manipulate them into doing certain things for their financial gain.
Yeah, it breaks down their judgment and their ability to advocate for themselves and to, think clearly on their own best interests. So it's a compromising mechanism, a tool that's used by predators worldwide. compromise their mind by drugs and alcohol, get them addicted, and then that's another control mechanism. It's heartbreaking, but it's common. So yeah, that's what happens. And then there are a lot of women that are recruiters, Beef. They'll go out and mentor these runaways. They know where the runaways go to, the bus stations and the bus stops and places like that, where they just go to try to find transportation out of their hometown and food and shelter. And typically the game is like, hey, we've got a little club here. It's like family. You could be one of us. We survive together and we take care of each other. And then there's nothing mentioned first about the drugs usually and the prostitution. It's about, hey, we take care of each other, and then it morphs into, over time, hey, we kind of have to take care of each other, and some of what we do is we kind of we take care of people a little bit, we entertain, and with the money that we can feed each other and ourselves, and we survive, and it's us, we're a family, we're a team, we're a tribe, and then
right.
It just gets worse and worse.
So these things, I guess there's multiple facets to this, obviously, but a lot of times the grooming process, like, it's not an overnight thing or something that happens immediately. Like, this could go on for months and months before they kind of have them. They build that trust with them, right? That's what they're trying to do. They're, oh, trust me. This is going to be good for you. And then all of a sudden they kind of, they have control of that person and able to do what they want.
Yeah. They use the terminology Romeo pimp. So a guy that will pretend to be if it's a girl, her boyfriend. Hey, I love you. We're a team. We've got some other girls here. I love them too. It's kind of all like a clan, like we're all one. And then over time turns into a gorilla pimp, just an abusive beater. And it's like, I'm gonna just beat the stuffings out of you if you don't do exactly what I say. So it usually turns over time. A year or two into it, a lot of times these Romeo pimps that are the boyfriend turn into the gorilla pimp. So it's sad.
Have you been able to pinpoint how those people get into that position? Like we can kind of identify some of the victims and the way that they get into that. They've come from broken households, no fathers, getting passed around because they got pulled out of their home at a young age, and they just don't have a family, and they're runaways, and all that kind of stuff. But like a lot of these predators, have you been able to track down and pinpoint how they get into the position that they're in, or have you just kind of narrowed it down to like these are just sick, twisted people?
Now that you mention that, there's one common factor in this. You don't find people that are doing this that have loving, present fathers in the home. If a dad loves their kids and he's around and he's mentoring and teaching and loving his kids and he's present in their lives, and this is not I'm not saying the fathers to diminish on the mothers, but the kind of mothers almost always have to be there, right? They give birth to the kids, and a lot of them get abandoned and left to do it on their own,
right? And which is what
tragic too.
Yeah, it is, and which is again, like the whole mission of our company, right? Is to get dads more involved with their children from day one, because so many, like, I'm upset right now because there's a lot of moms at home giving birth in hospitals or going to doctor's offices, and the dad's not allowed to be there. He's not allowed to come into the doctor's office for the checkups and all these things. Like, why are we getting deprived of that because of a virus? Like, we're all in the same house together to begin with. Like, why can't I come in for my child's checkup or the birth of the child? Like, I've heard some crazy stories in the last few weeks, but it's like, why are we getting deprived of that because we didn't grow the baby? Like, we are still the father of that child. And I think it's bullshit that there's such a divide and such a separation of that's for mom to do. That's for mom to do. Like certain things. Yeah, that's like, I can't breastfeed a child. I get it. But I can be there for everything else. You know what I mean? And it just makes me so mad because, as I try to be such an active, involved parent and love my kids more than anything. And then there's people that are like trying to strip that away for other people currently, especially currently. But like, and I understand like some of the health things with that, but it still doesn't make sense to me, and it just makes me angry because you got some dads out there trying to be there that aren't able to be, and I think it's ridiculous. But again, back to
some of that believe is ignorance, and the rest of it is an agenda. They're not, no matter how, if I had to raise my children by myself, I would be the best dad and the best mommy I could. But I could never be as good a mommy to them, a nurturing, loving mother, the way only a woman can do. I could never do that as well as a woman. That's just factual reality.
Mm-hmm.
Women are better at that. They are better at some things than we are. And ultimately, there is no better combination than a loving mother and father to raise well-grounded, secure children who grow up to be secure, productive adults. And that's one of the things that has made our country so strong. Talking about the military now, if you want to talk about national security, well, look at the 45 goals of the communists created after World War II to overcome the United States. They knew they couldn't beat us militarily with tanks, planes, and guns. So they targeted what made us strong, what made us insurmountable, what made us undefeatable as a nation was our culture. And at the core of that culture are basic Judeo-Christian values, our Constitution that protects us and puts we the people in charge, unlike other countries. Our government's not supposed to tell us everything to do. We're supposed to choose what we do. That's a unique culture. And the mother and father family unit is at the core of that culture, and it works, and it provides a unity. Those things together and our patriotism provide a secure populace who love their country, who love each other, and will fight like hell, right? That's hard to beat. So they are targeting that. And that's why a lot of what we're seeing through big Hollywood, mainstream news media and pop culture, and even academia now, they're trying to tear that down. Why? Because they've all been bought out by our global enemies that are on that Marxist agenda. They want a singular world system where a few people have control of it all, and you and I lose our freedoms and liberties. And there is no strong and powerful United States in that. And what makes the United States so strong? Loving mother and father family unit to raise their children. So, man, I don't think there's a whole lot more important than good loving parents. And it's
at the foundation.
It's being targeted for a reason. They're targeting it for a reason, and we have to defend that.
100%. And I've talked to some other people in law enforcement and stuff, and they've said the same thing. A lot of the criminals that they deal with, a lot of the crime, real at the core of it is just like really messed up households and homes and broken homes and runaway kids and drugs and just like not. And at the root of that is because their father wasn't around to teach them right from wrong. Right? This is the right way to do this. You don't do that. You don't lie, cheat, and steal. You don't treat a woman that way. And or they didn't have the father at home treating their wife respectfully. And maybe that translates to the son to think that, oh, it's normal to beat your wife. That's okay. That's the household I grew up in. It's normal to tell my wife this or to treat her that way. And we had Dakota, Dakota Meyer. Had him on the podcast, and we went out to dinner afterwards when he was here, and it was like, the reason I came here to do this podcast is because you're showing society, you are outwardly showing what it looks like to be a good parent, right? Like you're setting a new standard. There's a lot of people who come from broken homes that don't realize they came from broken homes because their normal is here, and you guys are setting a new standard and bringing the normal line up here, and they're like, oh dang, I didn't realize that was bad until now. He's like, you're shedding light on a situation that people don't realize that they came from broken homes. He's like, there was a lot of things in my life, in his life, he came from kind of a screwed up, messed up, broken household too, where he lived in a trailer in like backwoods Kentucky or something, and like SWAT teams kicking in his door, and his mom's growing weed in his bedroom closet, and like all this stuff is like a regular occurrence. He's like, man, I didn't know house didn't have wheels till I was like 11 years old. Like he came from that sort of a situation where it's just like it was normal for the cops to kick your door in, and it was just like crazy. He's like, but I didn't know that wasn't normal until later on. Yeah.
It broke my heart. He was staying here at the house one time. He and I would were going to do some sniper competitions as a team there for a while back. And he came into the living room. My wife was opening a window, and he said, "Oh, are you smoking crack?" And she's like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Well, are you blowing your smoke from your, crystal meth or something out the window?" She goes, "No, we don't do that here." And she goes, "Oh my God, Craig, what kind of house did he grow up in? Like, what is he expecting?" Like,
And yeah,
so
it's crazy. And
it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to grow up like that.
No, not at all. But it was really interesting to me because, to be honest, I didn't view ourselves that way, and until he told me that. I was like, oh, no shit. Because I came from a great household where my parents were awesome, and I wouldn't change anything about it, and that's my normal. So I just assumed everyone else had that life too, And then as you gain experiences in life and talk to other people, you realize, like, whoa, there's some really screwed up stuff in the world. And even Gary Vee, I'm sure you're familiar with who Gary Vee is. Maybe not the social media kind of expert guy, but he was on the podcast. He's got a huge following, and he's a massive company, hundreds of millions of dollars and all this stuff. And he attributes a lot of his success to the way he was parented. And so we had him on the podcast. We're talking about those things. And he's like, he's like, there's a stigma around dads and stay-at-home dads. And he's like, I think that there's a lot of moms who might be better off at job being, the one making the money. And there's plenty of dads in the world who might be a better, more nurturing person. As you talked about, I would be the best mom I could be. There's a lot of dudes who are naturally more nurturing and more caring maybe than their wife. And the roles might be reversed, and they might all be a better household that way. But there's such a stigma around stay-at-home dads that they're afraid to speak up and say, you know what, I think I'd be a better dad at home and let you go to work, Sally, or whoever. And it was just really interesting to kind of start hearing some of those perspectives. And it made me really want to spread our message and our mission even more. Cause I'm like, man, we're really making an impact, especially if we can get those dads involved at an earlier age. It's just a really interesting, thought.
Yeah.
That so much of broken society just comes down to mom and dad.
You're right. And that's what I've seen as well. And I grew up with a mom and dad that were like honeymooners for 60 years. They were married all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it was cool, but I didn't realize that it was abnormal. I grew up watching Leave It to Beaver and shows like that, where there was always a mom and dad, and there was a respectful, loving home. And it wasn't until I was in high school when we could start to drive. Most of the buddies that I all hung out with would all get together to drive from Texas up to Colorado to go skiing over Christmas. I'm like, Christmas, that's the best day of the year. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Why are you guys leaving your families for Christmas? They're like, Craig, look at our families. All of our parents are divorced. We don't have what you have.
Yeah.
And so tough. I never went skiing with all my buddies, but that was my kind of wake up call, my eye opener. Like, man, what I have is precious, and it's not standard. It's not automatic, and I began appreciating it a lot more.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't discount too. There's a lot of families that may, I don't know what the correct definition of a broken home is, but there's plenty of divorced parents, right, that have kids that go back and forth between mom and dad. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to make sure that, I don't want to throw shade on any of those situations, because I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. A lot of times it's better if mom and dad don't get along and they're better off apart, as long as both parties are involved the best they can be and the kid's not getting ruined from it. I think that that's perfectly, I think that there's no problem with that. We're seeing that a lot more in society. A lot of marriages don't last in the US the way they used to. That's completely changed. I don't know what the statistics are on that. But I don't think that's the problem necessarily, as long as dad is still involved and doing his best and not just being like, well, not my problem anymore, see ya. That's where it's a problem.
Yep. Yeah, and it's hostile for a government to pay a mom to keep having children as long as there's no dad in the house. And I'm a critic of the welfare system, because it's just like these guerrilla pimps do to their victims, their girls that they sell and the boys that they sell, keep them strung out on heroin, give them just enough heroin to where they're compromised where they don't have enough clarity of thought to escape and run away and do something better. And I think if you give somebody just a little trickle of money, just enough to stay in the ghetto and buy their crack cocaine, and as long as there's no father around, and not get an education, not build their own company, not go aspire to something higher, just to stay down. I think that's such an ugly and hostile thing. And it's couched in this, we're giving them, we're helping them. And it's like, no, that's not how you help somebody.
Right.
You give them a hand up. You don't give them a handout and to keep them down and keep them in the ghetto. That's an ugly thing. And I hope people start realizing that more and more, so that everybody can kind of step up and grow into a better life. And man, anytime you're going to pay someone to have kids, as long as there's no man around, that's an ugly act of hostility. We need to see through that.
For sure. And
it's not accidental.
Yeah, there's a lot of families that get trapped into that, right? Like there's a single mom, you know, maybe she's got her daughter, she finds some boyfriend, and then you know, you've got a sick, twisted boyfriend, he starts abusing the daughter. Mom sort of turns a blind eye to it because she needs to be able to live off of this guy because he's providing the money for them to all live and survive. I mean, it's just crazy. It's heartbreaking to think that mothers would turn an eye to their own child being abused for the sake of this guy paying for dinner.
Yeah.
I mean, it just breaks my heart. Something else I wanted to touch on was NAMBLA. You guys talked a lot about the NAMBLA stuff, and you know, part of this, I want to know if there's a way to identify predators. You know, as I talked about the fear of you know, a father with 2 young daughters, like, is there a way to identify some of these predators, which kind of made me think about the NAMBLA and the stuff that was going on there, because those, based from the documentary from Contraland, those people didn't seem to be super identifiable. They kind of walked all the facets of life, right? Of like, they're not one type of person.
Yeah, it's really true. You can't judge a book by its cover in this case. You have to judge by behavior. And, you know, Bob Hamer was a Marine that went into the FBI. He's on our board, and he went inside of NAMBLA while he was undercover with the FBI and got 8 convictions on their senior officials there. North American Man-Boy Love Association. They're a pedophile group that targets young boys. And it's our government not only allows it and made it legal, but and some of them are promoting it. There are members of Congress that I think are members of NAMBLA.
So this is
and
like,
we, the
this
people,
is an
don't even
open organization like that. I wasn't familiar with NAMBLA before watching Contraland.
Yeah, it's a very sick and disturbing occurrence that we have a group of child predators that are allowed to have an organization and advertise what they do, and even buy political influence and lobbying, and it's a big organization, and I think it should not exist.
Yeah, it blows my mind.
And they say that, well, to be a pedophile is not a crime. Well, raping a boy is a crime, and that's what you're all about. That's what you're facilitating. So just a bunch of sick minds.
Yeah, and they go through the same grooming process, right? Like you guys explained. It's
They
like,
do.
oh, hey, check out my cool car. You want to go for a ride? You know, and then they build that trust. And these the victims of NAMBLA, the young boys, what kind of, do they come from the same kind of broken home situations, or is it just completely random?
Yep.
Where they're looking for that validation.
Bob Hamer, and I believe even in the interview in Contraland, you even hear him say it. He's never seen a boy victim who is significantly compromised who had a loving father in the home. Never.
It's crazy.
That's how effective having a dad who's loving and present is in these child's lives. So again, a mother's irreplaceable, a father's irreplaceable. Sometimes parents have to do it on their own, and God bless those that have to. But man, if you can have a loving mother and father together, that's an unbeatable combo.
For sure. All right, now let's kind of flip it over a little bit. This is going to get to be touchy for you, I'm sure. As a dad who has done all the things that you've done, and actively going after predators and loves his daughter, for your own daughter's situation, I'll let you, maybe, do you want to explain it so I don't butcher it?
Yeah, well, speaking of good and evil, I mean, people can weigh this out on their own. But as soon as I had thrown my hat in the ring and we had dedicated, and I had announced that I was going to bring all of the assets that I could bear against child trafficking in the United States to expose it and eradicate it, we began building the organization, fundraising, doing what it took to stand this thing up. And our daughter was taken at knife point and sexually assaulted all night long by a serial rapist, a local serial rapist that had been in and out of the system his whole life and should have been in prison. Quite frankly, he should have never been on the streets to harm our daughter. But
and she survived. So, she survived this incident, and she tells the story in the documentary for those that want to hear a little bit more about it. But
yeah,
as he told her, "I'm going to kill you," by the way, right? And like, so
yeah, he was telling her he had killed all the rest of his victims and he was going to kill her, and he didn't know why he hadn't killed her yet. And so she, in order to survive, she had to figure out what made him tick and what that sick SOB needed to hear so that she could get away from him. And so she basically out-thought him.
Kind of manipulated,
she figured him out. She's very intelligent and she's very strong girl. And so she figured out what she needed to do to survive. And she told him whatever he needed to hear. And that was not
good for her.
It's not anything I would want any young girl to have to experience.
Right. And those are the fears.
Very traumatizing.
Of course. I can imagine that what was going through her head and then your head after the fact, getting that phone call, and how you guys dealt with that as a family. I know that's probably, it'll never be the same for you guys.
Yeah. But here's some positive stuff that came out of that. So she decided that she wanted to fight back. So we did, and she went through the full rape kit, talked to the investigators. It was a whole thing where they went and found him and brought him in. And he spent 2.5 years in jail while we're fighting to get him prosecuted. And our system in Tucson, Arizona, allowed this serial predator to fire 13 different public defenders. And finally, his 14th one, he fired and then represented himself, but he brought his defender with him. So anyway, before he was allowed to go to trial or made to go to trial, my daughter said she wanted to participate with us in our joint sting operations with law enforcement. And anyway, after some negotiation process, she let me know she was going to do it with or without me. And so I decided she was going to do it. She's going to do it with me, where I could make sure she was safe. And she helped us put 9 predators away. And the average number of children that these predators harm is 70 each. So look at all of the children that will never be raped because of her actions and helping fight back.
Right, which really empowered her. That seemed to be a huge healing process for her to be able to take that power back and put these guys away and kind of have a handover on them.
Yeah, she would just watch them morph. Some of them passed out, some of them cried, some of them tried to run, some of them begged for leniency, and she would just fold her arms and get really close to them and just look at them. In a couple places, she would get almost too close. I'm like, not that close.
Back up.
We don't get to do that.
Social distancing.
Yeah, you're not law enforcement. But she was angry.
I bet.
But she would watch them, their entire countenance change from predator into prisoner. And she saw that she could fight back and that the system could work for her. And she spoke about it. And so many other mothers let us know, and the victims themselves, hey, I'm a victim, or my daughter was a victim, and thank you for, talking about what you've done. It's empowered me or my daughter too. So that's cool for me as a father to be proud of our daughter and fight back. And and have something so powerful and good come from it. So then eventually we did have the trial, and she was made to be put on the witness stand and tormented by her own rapist for over 2 hours. He was able to accuse her of all kinds of horrible things, and the judge really didn't stop him, and let him try to humiliate our daughter. And then our daughter just kept speaking the truth right to the jury over and over and over again. She was ignoring all of his antics. And then after, what was so beautiful, I wish everybody could have seen this courtroom trial, as the expert witnesses came in with the factual evidence, the DNA evidence, the video evidence, and what the evidence revealed was exactly what Aspen had said, word for word, every time. It was so beautiful to see the nails being put in this predator's coffin, and every single thing he said was a lie, and everything that she had described was absolutely accurate. And so they put him away, and guilty on all counts, 68 years.
Good for you guys. I'm proud of her for that. That's incredible. Good for her.
Yeah, she's a good one. So she still struggles with it a lot, but that was really helpful in helping her kind of get back in on the saddle, so to speak, in life.
Yeah, and
not just sit and let it shatter her,
let it ruin her. Yeah. Gosh. So one of my questions here is what can we do about it as a society and as a group? How do we stop it? What kind of training can we give our kids? What do we need to be talking to them about? In Aspen's case, right, where she was held at knife point, it wasn't about a broken home. It wasn't about a dad that didn't love her. It wasn't about being groomed. It wasn't all this stuff. It was just like a straight up knife point, kidnapping, rape situation. So, kind of amongst all of those things, like what are the things that we need to be doing for our own kids and our own families to ensure that this doesn't happen to us?
Yeah, well, I give a hard target training course that's all about personal security. It gives a lot of empowering information on situational awareness, threat recognition, how to avoid this exact thing. And so my daughter's been through that course now. Yeah. And so her situation is entirely different. Of course, she's armed to the teeth, and she's agitated. And I
would hate to get on the other side of her.
The next poor chump that tries anything on her is just going to be a statistic on the news. And but situational awareness. Look, I teach in my course just the simple discipline, the self-learned behavior of the scan. And what I mean by a scan is take your eyes and look from left to right and look at who's there and what's there, and just get a general sense of the occurrences of who's there and what's going on around you. Whether you walk into a new hallway, a new room, or you walk back outside from in a building, or you walk into a building from outside, you're in a new space. You should have this self-taught discipline. You have to make yourself do it for a while, and then it'll become instinctive. And just look completely from your left to the right, and just drink in the surroundings.
Right.
Your brain can process it. When you can see it at a flash sight picture, either it's safe to cross the street or it's not, right? Due to the closing speed, your mind's calculated all these things. You can look at families and strollers and people that look normal and peaceful and reasonable, and understand that it looks generally okay, right? It's not like you're freaking out and jumping around, hut, 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 like in the Blues Brothers movie or something like that. It's a calm, more practical thing. But if you see somebody that's up to no good, and there's a negative energy and current flowing through them, and their countenance is different, and they're in a predatory hunting mode, they're in a different state of mind, and there's an energy there. You can look at it, and your brain, your subconscious will pick it up on it, but you have to give it a chance through picking it up through your eyes. So just do that scan and look around at people, and yep, everything looks fine. But if there's something that's shady or shaky or janky, it'll start to kind of weigh on your subconscious, like, whoa, wait a minute, this guy feels creepy over there. And if you'll just give your chance to do that, you can start making further assessments, like, is it that janky that I need to change my direction or turn around and go back or whatever? You can elevate from there, but you have to have that basic scan. So that's one thing. General situational awareness, threat recognition. Don't be in the wrong part of town at the wrong time, right? half the battle. You know, I've done a lot of high threat mobile security for dignitaries, for Department of State and other agencies we don't talk about over in the war zones, right? Keeping these high-ranking American officials off of Al Jazeera in an orange jumpsuit, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of intelligence there, daily intelligence, and up to the moment, even sending scout cars ahead so that we know the surrounding environment and what's going on, what's current. And hey, you know, there's two trucks with blacked out windows right up on the overpass that we're about to go under, and it's the same description as the terrorist unit that's been hitting motorcades on this freeway, right? That's something you want to know before your precious cargo gets there, and those kinds of things. So translating to the local level, what's on the news, what part of town is problematic, what kind of crimes are current, you know, there's a lot of carjackings, there's a lot of breaking and entries, you know, what's going on, so that you're generally more aware and can respond a little sooner to that and avoid it. And then another thing is on our website, vetsforchildrescue.org, we've got a lot of empowering tools for families. And some of those are apps that are problematic. If you look on your cell phone, there's a lot of apps that your children have on there that they talk to each other on, and they share videos and images on. Well, the predators use those apps to stalk your children. And what a lot of parents don't know is some of those apps, not only can the predator pretend to be another child and befriend your child and trick them and start sending your child pornography and get your child to take pictures of themselves and start sending it back, and then start blackmailing your child, terrorizing them, scaring them for it, and sharing the pictures all over God's green earth. But they can also geolocate your child all the way down to the nearest bedroom. They can figure out what bedroom of your house your child is in, or from some of the geolocating software that's in some of these apps that are on your children's phones. So one of the things is you have to be willing to invade your child's privacy and realize they can't advocate for themselves yet. They don't understand the dangers, and you have to get in there and parent them. You have to understand who your child's talking with and what apps that they're dealing with and what the dangers are. So go to vetsforchildrescue.org, scan those toolbox, so you can safeguard your family and your children that way. So very important.
Craig, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank
man.
you. Thank you. I'm super happy to have had you on the show and talk with us and educate us about what's going on in the world in terms of human trafficking and stuff. Is there anything else that we should share with the audience? Anything that I haven't touched on?
No, man, I just want them to really go and go watch Contraland. It's free. Several big networks are picking it up, and it'll air on those to hundreds of millions of households. But right now it's on contralandmovie.com, and it is powerful. It's a genuine walkthrough of the factual evidence that we could gain in our 3-year filming of this, and we show you what's going on and that you need to know. And we're a nonprofit org. We do this on donations. So the more people that help us, the more predators we can arrest, and the more documentaries we can film to empower more Americans. Because right now, with our media system being basically hostile and covering for the child predators, it's hard to get empowering information out like this out to the people. So we need each other to share it socially, and share it by email and private messaging. Share the link and encourage your friends and family to watch it so that they can be empowered too, so nobody gets left behind. And hound your elected officials. Say, we want stronger enforcement, better protections for our children. This is destroying the future of our nation.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the you go back to the system, and it's such a broken system. The justice system, with like the guy that raped your daughter should not have been on the streets, and that happens all the time. And there's tens of thousands of cases like that. Like this, what was this dude even doing on the street? Who let him back out on the street to commit another crime while he waited a trial, or did this or did that? And he's just a career criminal. The system is awfully broken in regards to that.
We need to crack down on our enforcement. We really do need to start. Life would get better for every single American if we would crack down and start enforcing our existing laws much more effectively.
Right.
Really
And it
would.
seems like different people get held to a different standard, which is bullshit. You know, like we talk about these elite type pedophiles, the Epsteins of the world, or this or that, who are just like, they kind of like let them get away with it for a while or whatever. They're held to a different standard, or they can pay their way out of it or whatever. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be that way, and that's a lack of enforcement is there because of corruption. So we've got global billionaires buying judges and district attorneys and sheriffs and chiefs of police and politicians because they want influence. And I tell you what, if you got a judge that hasn't prosecuted child sex crimes, you got a corrupt judge, because this is an epidemic. So judges should be putting child predators away like it's a sport, man, like it's a race.
Right.
If you got one that doesn't have a record of that, you got a crooked judge, and you need to vote them off the bench, folks. This is a serious threat to all of our children and the future of our country. If you talk about strategically, internationally, our enemies want our children psychologically traumatized and shattered because they grow up to be pretty darn ineffective adults at defending their homeland, a culture they barely feed themselves.
Well, we're seeing that
so
play out
damaging,
already
you know?
with certain generations of people doing ridiculous things right now with you know, all these riots and all this craziness, and I won't even get into that side of it. But I mean, you've already seeing it play out with, you know, there's just a bunch of people out there throwing temper tantrums, and they're getting what they want.
Well, if we went out and had the ability to interview all of these juveniles that are throwing these temper tantrums, we would find a startlingly high, alarming high rate of no father in the home and trauma, abuse or trauma, sexual abuse or physical abuse or psychological, emotional abuse, traumatized youth, no father in the home. They're not grounded. They don't know what they stand for. They're easily manipulated through ideological subversion campaign, which is heavy. There's trillions of dollars being spent to subvert the culture of the United States right now. And what you're talking about, all these rioting, looting, and arson and everything else, are these targeted victims. They're using Antifa. They're using BLM. These organizations are just subversive symptoms against our country. They're not accomplishing anything for equality or anything like that. No, they're being run by political subversive groups and billionaires for their own political gain. It's unfortunate, but it's a good example of what happens. Look at those crazy people with all the crazy hair and the safety pins and the inked up face and all that. What are they messaging? They're messaging that they're broken, that they're miserable, that they don't like this world, that they're rebelling because God only knows what's been done to them. They need love. They need healing. They need education. They need help. You know, they don't need a Molotov cocktail and a bullhorn, right? And marching orders to go attack their own neighborhoods. So, yeah, you're right, brother. You're right. It is a symptom of it, and we need to fix it. And stronger enforcement, good, loving homes. That's the way out of this. You know.
Yeah.
Put the people behind bars that are ruining life for all of us, and let the rest of us live healthy, productive, happy lives.
That's it. Cool. Craig, thank you so much once again. I really appreciate it. Everybody that's listening, thank you very much. Make sure you go check out Vets for Child Rescue, and we'll make sure that all the links that we discussed are in the description to the video. Craig, thanks again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Take care, brother.
Guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. As I said before, all of the things that we discussed will be links will be down in the description. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave your comments, ratings, reviews, all the things. I would appreciate it. And I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.